Join us on this 9 miles kayak from Ferryside to Carmarthen on the Towy Estuary on the 18th of August 2024. Watch on to find out about what it's like paddling the estuary of one of the biggest rivers in Wales. Learn about the Itiwit X100 and the Sandbanks Optimal inflatable kayaks that we used on this trip. Discover some of the wildlife that you can encounter on the Towy Estuary and learn about the history of the Towy Estuary, including the legacies that the Romans and Normans left here. This kayak on the Towy Estuary was a one-way route of 9 miles from Ferryside upstream to Carmarthen. We launched from Ferryside at 3:15 and paddled upstream the Towy Estuary with the incoming tide. The estuary narrowed as it meandered through wooded bluffs and farmland. We paddled into the historic town of Carmarthen, landing at the quayside at 5:15. Just looking across the estuary to Llansteffan Castle. Llansteffan is an alternative launch point if you fancy. And then looking upstream towards Carmarthen and panning back towards Ferryside Beach where the guys are inflating the kayaks using an electric pump. Just looking across towards Llansteffan with its 12th century castle. It's 3:15 and the tide has come in enough for us to launch, so it's 9 miles upstream to Carmarthen. It was low tide at about 1:30 PM and high tide at 6:15 PM on the day of our trip. We had therefore launched almost 2 hours after low tide, so that we'd have the assistance of the incoming tide. Up on the left you can see the Mansion House at Panter Athro, which is a great restaurant with superb views over the estuary. Launching about 2 hours after low tide should give you more than enough time to get to Carmarthen before high tide. If you get to Carmarthen early, you can always carry on upstream for a mile or so before paddling back to Carmarthen. Alternatively, if you had more stamina than us, which most people do, then you could do it as a 18 miles circular route, paddling up to Carmarthen with the incoming tide and then back downstream to Ferryside or Llansteffan with the outgoing tide. We passed the Towy Boat Club, which nestles on the west bank of the estuary. As well as sailing, they apparently have a rowing section, but we didn't see any of them out on the Towy that day. The high tide was 2.1 metres at Carmarthen on the day of this trip. This was a reasonably high tide based upon the tidal range for Carmarthen. With estuaries, we find it's best to paddle them when the high tide is in the upper half of the range for the location in question, since you will have more water in the estuary and there's less chance of you grounding out on sandbanks. We have done a guide to estuary kayaking video that we've uploaded to our kayaking guides playlist of our channel. This 9 miles journey was part of our mission to paddle every section of the 870 or so miles of the Wales coast. It also overlapped with our mission to kayak every section of the Towy River from Llansteffan down to the sea. The tidal assistance on the estuary is almost like having an electric motor on your kayak. This is certainly a route that you need to do with the tide, otherwise it could be a case of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. We've spotted a friendly seal over there swimming towards us. If he's after our sandwiches, then he's out of luck. We've already eaten them. It looks like he wants to join the kayak crew. That seal seems to be following us upstream. Perhaps he wants to race to see who gets to Carmarthen first. I think Archie and Ethan were frightened of the seal, and now it's gone they've decided it's safe to come over. Archie and Ethan are using the tandem version of the Sandbanks Optimal full drop stitch inflatable kayak. The Sandbanks Optimal inflates to 12 psi, so it's very firm, almost like a hard shell. There's some rare footage of dive paddling. Those white birds in the background are little egrets. We're not paddling, and as you can see the tide is still pushing us upstream about 3 miles an hour. As the Towy did its best to impersonate the Mississippi, we continued onto the middle section of the estuary on our tide-assisted trip. The Towy is one of the few rivers in Wales where coracles are still used for fishing. Coracles are small, rounded, lightweight boats traditionally used in Wales and some parts of Western Ireland. We'd love to try one out, but we'd probably end up in the water more than in the coracle. Regarding logistics, at Ferryside we had left my car parked at the free car park in the middle of the village, which is just 100 metres or so from Ferryside Beach. At Carmarthen we had parked at the quay, which is the street that runs alongside the west bank of the river. We did this trip on a Sunday when there is unlimited on-street parking on some of the quay. If you did this paddle Monday to Saturday, then you can only park for 1 hour on the quay, so you'll instead need to find a plain display car park nearby. If you only had one vehicle, then you can either get a bus or a train between Carmarthen and Ferryside. The bus service is number 198. Alternatively, you could get a taxi from one of the companies which operate out of Carmarthen. If you wanted to land or launch on the other side of the estuary at Llansteffan, then the route is the same distance and there is a car park at Llansteffan Beach. Bus 227 runs between Carmarthen and Llansteffan. On the right of the picture you can see Green Castle Wood near to the village of Llangain. On the edge of the woodlands is Castell Mole, also known as Green Castle, which is the remains of a 16th century fortified manor house. On this trip, Di and I were using the 2 or 3 person version of the Itiwit X100 inflatable kayak. This is a hybrid inflatable with low pressure side tubes and high pressure drop stitch floor. The X100 is a stable and comfortable inflatable kayak. We have done full reviews of both the Sandbanks Optimal and the Itiwit X100 kayak that we used on this trip on our product reviews playlist of our channel. We have also done blog post reviews of them on the product reviews page of our website, which is linked below. As you know, the kayak crew navigate by pubs. We had a beer at the White Lion at Ferryside, a great pub just next to the car park and near to the beach, while we were waiting for the tide to come in enough to launch. At Carmarthen we had a post-kayak beer and some food at Irhen Lerwen, a great Wetherspoons pub named after Carmarthen's most famous landmark, the Priory Oak, which stood in Priory Street for more than 300 years. We're about 2.5 miles downstream from Carmarthen now, paddling through farmland either side of the river. There's some cows watching us from the bank and probably wondering what the heck we're doing. We better not stop here for a break just in case we cause a stampede. It's hard to starboard. The river certainly meanders a lot downstream of Carmarthen. Looks like Archie and Ethan need a coxswain to help them steer because they're on a collision course. The tide was still carrying us upstream as we approached Carmarthen for the final push. We approached the White Bridge, which is a Bascule railway bridge built over the Towy between 1908 and 1911. Carmarthen is reputed to be the oldest town in Wales, even predating Port Talbot. The Romans established a fort here called Moradunum in about 75 AD. The Romans replaced the fort with a town in the 2nd century AD. The Forum and Basilica were probably under the most built-up area of the present town on the main street. Carmarthen has one of only 7 surviving Roman amphitheatres in Britain. The Roman town was deserted by the early 5th century, but by the late medieval period, a small Welsh urban settlement, later known as Old Carmarthen, had come into existence. This was eclipsed by New Carmarthen, an early 12th century Anglo-Norman town centred around the castle. The town prospered, a friary and priory were founded, and the town was provided with defences. Throughout the medieval period, Carmarthen was the largest and most important town and port in Wales. You could land at the pontoon or slipway at the quay centre, which is the blue building on the left. If so, then please show consideration to other users of the slipway and pontoon and consider making a donation to the owners, Carmarthen Boat Club, to help them fund their upkeep. Carmarthen Rowing Club were using the slipway as we arrived, and we decided to land further upstream at some steps down off the quay into the river. This worked out well since we landed near to where we left our second vehicle at the quay. If you enjoyed the video, then please give us a thumbs up and consider clicking on the left to subscribe to our channel. Click on the right for other videos of our trips around the Wales coast. Happy paddling from the kayak crew.